Welcome to Know the Love of Christ. Here we are, episode 2 of season 4, where we're studying the book of Ecclesiastes. This week, we're going to actually get into the book, and we decided that this season we're going to read the chapter because we're going to do one chapter per episode. So we'll read the whole chapter first and then get into our study.
All right, so I'm reading from the ESV, the English Standard Version. Ecclesiastes 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness, a man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already, in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
So we discussed last week the thoughts of Solomon being the author, or maybe some other people, quoting, or whatever the case may be. I know you wanted to mention something about the word vanity.
Yeah, so I did look up that word there. In the Hebrew, it's hevel. And most of the translations that we have, most of the versions that we read from, are going to translate that as vanity. But the word actually means like breath or vapor. I know something I listened to or read said like a wisp of smoke. And so, of course, to us, when we think of vanity, we think of like pride and just things that are vain, which it does kind of carry that implication with what he's talking about in the context there. But really, it's more this idea of it being fleeting. These things are fleeting. These things are temporal. And so the value is significantly less, I would say. At least that's my take on it. But like if you look at different translations or different versions, I mean, some say meaningless, some say vanity, some say futility, some say pointless, some say useless. And that's not really the idea that the author is trying to convey. I don't know if y'all could hear that motorcycle or whatever it was that just was by us very loud. But yeah, so they use these words, and it doesn't quite get the nuance, I would say, and there are other places in Scripture that we can find this word. Specifically, if we go to Psalm 39, I'm going to read 4 says, O Lord, make me know my end, and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am. Behold, you have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is as nothing before you. Surely all mankind stands as a mere breath, Selah. That word breath there is the same word, hevel. And if you go down to verse 11, it says, when you discipline a man with rebukes for sin, you consume like a moth what is dear to him. Surely all mankind is a mere breath, Selah. And vanity is and can be applied there, but it's more this idea that it's fleeting. When you think of a breath, it's instant. It's here and it's gone. And
Right.
you know, when you that verse in Job 7:7, life is but a breath, or life is but a vapor. It's that idea.
Yeah, and he says in verse 17, I perceived that this also is grasping for the wind. And you know, if you think, okay, like the steam when you boil in something, you try to grasp it, you can't.
Right.
And it just disappears. Or the fog in the, when you're driving to work in the morning, it disappears as you're driving into it. So you just can't grasp it.
Right. And we kind of discussed this in the opening episode for this season. It comes across kind of bitter. You know, it comes across very depressing and somber and heavy. And there is a heaviness to this idea. I talked a little bit about existential anxiety or existential like dread. It's a heavy thing to think about your life. And when you leave, what are people going to know about you? Are they going to remember you? 100 years from now, is anybody even going to be talking about you? As humans, we want to think like we won't be forgotten. We're obsessed with taking pictures and keeping diaries, but we like to know that we're going to live on after we're gone, that we're going to be missed. But you don't want everyone to be a total basket case after you're gone, but you don't want everyone to be like throwing a party and thankful you're gone either.
Right. That word, habel, or vanity, I should say, is used 5 times in this verse and 29 times in this book. I mean, so he's trying to really emphasize how brief we are in the whole timeline, in God's timeline. We are just a little speck. He comes right out the chute saying, vanity of vanities, But it's to get your attention, and it's to get focus on what's important or what isn't important.
Right. And this is the thing. When you go and you talk to like a counselor, or you talk to people that speak on communication, they say, you really, in your communication, you need to avoid all encompassing words, like you never and always and all and every, and things that are very black and white, like that's very concrete. And obviously that's not really fair to do, to like if you're argue with your spouse and say, you never take out the trash when I ask you to. Obviously he has taken out the trash at least once when you asked him to. But that kind of language, you want to avoid that, but he doesn't avoid that here. Like, what does he say is vanity? All is vanity. And that word means like the whole of it is vanity. Everything is vanity. And we know about hyperbole. And I was thinking about when you go down to verse 4, it says, a generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. We know the earth isn't going to truly remain forever.
Right.
Eventually it will be consumed. And so, but it's this idea, like, it's going to remain so far past our life. Our life is just a wisp. It barely, it's a small, tiny dot on the timeline, like you said.
The wording, like today's wording might be, what's the point? What is my purpose? Why am I even here? About the whole earth, that's the only constant variable in the timeline is the earth. It's always been here. It was created first, even before man. It's a continuing thought of what's my point of life type of thing. He's not being literal, because 2 Peter 3 is very clear on this, about the finite nature of the earth. And Isaiah talks about a new earth, and that's repeated in Revelation, and we'll get into that another point. But it's the earth is not going to be here forever. I like in 5 through 7, these are kind of scientific facts. 5 is like the sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. Like it doesn't literally rise. We see it as being risen and going down because whatever.
But it's establishing that pattern.
Yeah.
This is something, like you said, it's a constant.
Yeah.
The sun is going to rise. When something happens, we say, the world doesn't stop turning. And this is kind of a different way of saying it. Like when you die, the world will not stop turning. The world doesn't revolve around us. It revolves, around the sun technically, but also around God, because he's the one that created it all.
And it's almost like this is what it's doing, and it just keeps on doing. So then, what's the point? It's kind of emphasizing that, but still going into the indirect scientific facts of it all.
Yeah, but I mean, I've heard this used in apologetics, I want to say. Some verses maybe here, and then verses from Psalms and Job that people have used in apologetics where like science didn't figure it out until much later. And the Bible has had these verses for a very long time, considerably speaking. And so, people often say like the Bible and science don't jive. True science and the Bible jive 100%. And it has known things long before scientists did. Like that word hastens in verse 5. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. What does the NKJV say there?
It hastens.
Okay. That word means to gasp or to pant after or to long for. And to me, like that just kind of takes it a little bit deeper. Like not only does the sun come up and go down, but our whole last season was about how Mark sprinted through everything. And I'm like, even the sun sprints, and that's what it's saying. Like it's going to go and it goes, as you get older and you have kids, even if you don't have kids, the years start flying, and I'm at that point now where I'm like, we're at the end of February and before I know it, we're going to be in 2024 and, and then my kids are going to be grown up and married and we have grandkids tomorrow, basically. That's what it feels like.
But you're right.
I am. And that's, we talk about it, the days are long, but the years are short. We have all these cutesy ways to say it. If there was ever a more relatable verse, please tell me.
Okay, I want to discuss verse 8. All things are full of labor. ESV says weariness.
Yeah, all things are full of weariness.
Man cannot express it, which I agree with that.
We sure try.
We sure do. We overuse, overwhelm. But the second part of this verse says, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. We want to see everything. We want to experience everything. We want to, hear things. I went to the original language, okay? Hearing, to hear is, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but shama, S-H-A-M-A, okay? To hear, listen to, obey, which I was not expecting that one, okay? And some others was to hear of or concerning, to hear with attention or interest, listen to. Okay, so with that in mind, read that verse again, that second half. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. So we want to see everything, we want to experience everything, but we don't quite want to hear what we should. Like we don't want to obey. Now tell me if I'm wrong. This is just from studying. It kind of caught my attention, so I did some digging and stuff. We want to experience, we see it, and we know, if you don't know, go read, about Solomon in his life. Or just follow along.
Read the rest of this book. He's already laid it out for you.
Stick with us the rest of the season. You'll find out all the stuff he has done. He got to experience everything. So his eye was never satisfied with seeing, but his ear, or our ears, I should say, is it ever filled with hearing? Like, is it ever satisfied? You know what I'm saying? Like, do we not obey? We hear. What's the experience of hearing? Yeah, we hear the birds chirping. We hear children laughing. We hear,
and there's a difference there between hearing and like
listening.
listening, hearing. It's like that active listening.
So is the ear not satisfied with hearing, filled with hearing?
Yeah.
Do we not want to obey? No, we don't. We don't want someone to tell us what to do. He starts off this way. What's the point? We want to see everything. We want to hear anything. We don't want to listen. And then he ends the book with, obey God, hear him. I've never read it in that light before.
I see it differently, of course. But for me, it's more like he's talking about all these things he's experienced. And it's kind of like when we're doing math right now, I write things on the whiteboard because that's what our curriculum tells me to do. She's not satisfied with watching me do it. She wants to do it herself. She wants to experience it. And that's where I take this, like, the eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. Like, we aren't satisfied to just sit by and be bystanders. We want to be active participants in the things we see, whether they be holy or not. When that's why peer pressure is so strong. Like, we have that desire, like, to experience it for ourselves. You know, I say, like, I know my kids are going to make mistakes. I just hope they make smart mistakes they can learn from. Since I know they will definitely make some, I want to make sure that they don't make the same stupid mistakes that I make. Of course, they want to do it for themselves.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the way that I took that. But I do like
ear was not filled with hearing.
That's
so
right.
They
I didn't
want to hear it.
Yeah.
Don't you find that interesting, though? I mean, I could be totally wrong.
But I do think that's applicable here. Welcome to the Philosophical Hour with Dee and Stephanie. Well, it's not a whole hour. Hopefully it's a half hour or less.
Right.
But I keep saying that. I love the language here. I just love it. It's poetic. It's, very philosophical.
So he goes into saying how there is nothing new under the sun, right? You know, sometimes we hear, oh, it's never been this bad before. Or, this generation.
Yes, that one.
This is just not like mine, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's nothing new under the sun. And if you think about our issues today, like I brought this up to someone, and he's like, well, what about abortions? There were child sacrifices in the Old Testament. That is no different.
We aren't, well, I would say that's like the way that we look at it, that's worse. The fact that they were, like, we are not to the point where we are openly sacrificing infants and small children in society, and it's being praised as a good, like, a good thing. I don't know that I've met someone, I'm sure they are out there, and I probably haven't watched enough on the internet to hear someone say abortion is a wonderful, great thing. Like, it's just so amazing. I've heard, my body, my choice, and it's the right decision for them or whatever. But I've not heard people say, I'm doing this for God or for my God or whatever. And I mean, people put it up as a viable option. They put it up as a right choice for some people, but it's not in a society where it's like, this is what we do to celebrate. Like, even there are trauma counselors for people that have had abortions. They know our society accepts that it's a stigmatized grief, that there are issues that come after it. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying it's different. We are not at the point where we have total, 2 and under killings or.
Right, yeah. But still.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm not saying that abortion's great or that our country should condone it. I'm saying we are not at that point yet where we have people openly out, and I don't know what we'd even call it. We don't have temples where people are going and sacrificing children on an altar.
No. But I mean, the abortion clinics are like a temple. I mean, it's legal.
It's all about
legal.
Doing what you want to do. Oh, yeah. I am saying, because we were making the point that, it's never been this bad. Oh, it's been worse in some places.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are things in our country that are the worst they've ever been anywhere.
Yeah.
But we can't paint those broad brush strokes and say, it's never been this bad before.
Right.
Oh, it has. It very much has.
And like pornography. I mean, that's the same, or very much the same, as the drinking orgy parties, like Queen Esther and King Ahasuerus, or however you say his name. I mean, that's still the same. So there's no, like he says, there's no remembrance of former things in verse 11, nor will there be any remembrance of the things that are to come. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. What's being done now has been done before.
Right. Homosexuality has been practiced
early on.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's nothing new.
This is a comfort to me. When I think about it, we talked about that verse. It was in Mark. Basically, it's the worst day in history.
Oh,
do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like,
the abomination of desolation.
Yeah. Nothing has ever been that bad, and nothing will ever be that bad again. That is the only thing I can think of that is outside of this realm right here. That is the worst of the worst, what happened there. And nothing will ever be that bad again. And I think I said that's where I found the love of Christ when we did that episode. But I do find comfort in that. And it makes me think of verses like 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has taken you that is uncommon to man. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah, I love that verse.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a comfort. And I think that is the same principle here. We can't just hang our heads and say, oh,
Woe is us.
yeah, woe is us. But we can't say like, oh, we got this figured out. Like we're the best that's ever been.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, if you want to wrap this all up in a principle, any focus like that isn't humble. All of that is self-centric. If anybody knew about self-centric, it's King Solomon. So, I mean, and that's what he's painting a picture for us here. Every time that I've read through the book, that's what's sticking out to me is like, I've made my whole life about me and I missed the point. Don't make the same mistake I made.
So the second part of this chapter, 12 through 18, the writer, Solomon, said that he set his heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. So he wanted to do everything. He wanted to see everything. He wanted to hear everything. Wanted to just do it. And he had the resources to do it. 2 Chronicles 9:20 says that he was so rich that silver had no value. He had God-given wisdom, That's all he had asked for. And he desired to see what life was all about. If you read throughout his life, the account of him, you'll see his desire to make alliances with nations that he shouldn't have. And because he sought alliances with these nations in his seeking out of wisdom, he learned their ways. And that ended up being his downfall. Hence the vanity of his wisdom. That's why I feel like he's the author of this book, because he's been there, done that. He went to the point of, what's the point of my life? God blessed me with so much, and I had so much, and I just wasted it. It was just a vapor. That's why I think he was old when he wrote this too. Because, like you said, we blink our eyes, and all of a sudden we're looking back on what? And to be in the position that he was in, and to be old and looking back on, oh, so you imagine the regret.
Yeah, and I think about that. I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Makes me think about Ezra 7, verse 10, where it talks about Ezra set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it and teach his statutes and rules in Israel. It's a lesson for us. We can seek it with our heart. We can set out to do it. If we falter off, you think about 1 John 1, where it talks about walking in the light. That's you stumble off some a little bit, but the majority of your life is in the light. That's what you're seeking, but it's a continual seeking. It's not, I think about Solomon and how he asked for wisdom, and I mean, that's a big ask right there, first of all. And he tells us at the end of this chapter, verse 18, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. It's not really a happy picture there. Right. But he's right. We have that saying, ignorance is bliss. And it's true in some aspects of our life, but, as far as godly matters, ignorance is never bliss. Like I said, it's like a hint of bitterness in here with these words. And I think about, James 1, where it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of God. And Solomon definitely asked, but there's something past that when you get further into that chapter. 22, but be doers of the word and not hearers, only deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. Wisdom is vexation. It's hard knowing the truth sometimes. It's very painful. But there's no way around it if you're going to be a faithful child of God. I don't think and I know we all know this, there's nothing wrong with applying your heart to know godly wisdom. It's applying your heart to know worldly wisdom that's a problem. That's where the folly lies.
All right, so now we have to stay true to our name of the podcast. Where do you find the love of Christ in this?
All right, so we're going to jump. I do find it here, but I'm bridging it to Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. So I didn't mention it earlier. I meant to, or if I mentioned it, I mentioned it so quickly in passing. That word there, Hevel, that I kept talking about, has some different meanings. But if you go just past verse 2 to verse 3, it says, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? I can't believe I skipped over this. But that word toil also means labor or trouble or mischief. And I know the question he's asking there, like, what good is all this work that we're doing? You know, the end of it is just more trouble. But if you turn to Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I see Jesus there in verse 3. You know, what does man gain by all the toil? When he makes that toil the toil that Jesus gives him, he gets rest, and he's given eternal life on the other side. And that's where I would say I see it. Very weirdly at the end.
I agree. Okay, I see it in verse 17. "And I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind." So we all, our eye is never satisfied with the madness and folly, right? But to set my heart to know wisdom, God gives wisdom generously, like he says in James 1:5. And look, he did it for Solomon. He has to be able to rule with wisdom, and he gave him more generously. So I think if I set my heart to know wisdom, wisdom is our salvation. Because if we are wise, we choosing godly wisdom, we would choose the gift of salvation. So if I set my heart to know wisdom, set my heart to know salvation, I won't want to know the madness and folly anymore. That is the grasping of the wind. So that's where I see the love of Christ.
All right, well, thank you again for joining us today. If you have any questions or comments, we really would love for you to contact us. I know we've mentioned in the last episode about our email, but we're also on Instagram and Facebook. Any feedback we would love. Negative, positive, thoughts you had, things we missed. Questions. But also, if you'd love to study, we actually have a couple studies going on right now. And we would love to study with you as well. Or if you're not local to us, we can connect you to someone local to you that would be willing to study with you. But as always, we hope that you will seek to know the love of Christ in your own life. And until...
If you like this episode, be sure and share it with someone. In doing so, you're sharing the love of Christ.